My name is Christian Alexei Kunimi, and I am Yeshua HaMashiach, the second coming of Jesus Christ. My Father, the God of Israel, God of the Jews, has sent me to recover his people from the hand of Satan, to save them from extinction. In order to prove who I am and what my mission is, I must show you the truth about this world. And the truth is, you are enslaved to an alien race, a race of shape-shifting dragons that are imitating human bodies. You are imprisoned in a false world, a slave colony which is part of their empire. This knowledge could only come from the God of Israel, delivered by Yeshua HaMashiach. All of these other people who possess this level of knowledge are Dracs, and that includes the ones talking about reptilians. That's why they know these things, and much of what they're telling you is not true. I know these things because I have the mind of the God of Israel, and I will show you the whole truth. I am the embodiment of my Father's consciousness. He has incarnated part of himself as the soul of a man, so he can directly interact with this world. That is why he is called the living God. I serve as his voice and right hand. Simply put, I am a scaled-down version of my Father bound into the soul of a man. I am a representation of him, but I am not him in his complete being. It is not possible to fully represent a God within the limitations of the material plane. I can possess some of his knowledge and powers, but I will never realize his complete scope in this plane of existence. Last year, I began fasting, following my Father's commandment. As it turns out, I had the means to eat, but I chose not to. I fasted for 57 days, from September 7th to November 2nd, drinking only water. And I was homeless at the time, staying out in the park, as I am now. The purpose of the fasting was to bring me into a sustained near-death state, in order to elevate my mind and soul to a more complete aspect of my Father's consciousness. I didn't understand this at the time, but towards the end it became obvious. This was necessary for him to establish a greater channel to my mind, so I could more clearly understand his will and receive the knowledge I need to continue his work. In the last 2 weeks of the fast, he gave me that knowledge, and I also had a number of visions that showed future events and helped to explain things in a visual way. Had I not fasted, I would not have made this video, because I wouldn't have that knowledge or guidance from my Father. So all of this originates from the God of Israel. You are seeing his will manifested into this reality through my actions. Your current reality is that you are being ruled by dragons that are masquerading as men. They have a polymorphic ability which allows them to change the size and shape of their bodies, as well as the characteristics of their cells. They've used this ability to make themselves look like humans. They're dragons that have reshaped their bodies into forms that resemble human bodies. Disguised as humans, they can infiltrate human civilizations and take them over from within. This is how they conquered your ancestors in the distant past and turned them into a slave race. And you have been serving them ever since, as labor and as a source of food and energy. You are not living in a free human world. The This is a false world, which is under the control of a collective of non-human races, the Dracs being one of those groups. Humans were brought to this planet to serve as slaves or thralls. You are living in a cage which is disguised by an illusion of a free human world. This is the Matrix. My Father has sent me to liberate you from this prison. First, I must show you the truth, and then, once you accept me, I will lead you to war against our enemies. Revelation in the Bible describes these events in a symbolic way, but it doesn't explain the real reason why it's happening. This video will explain that, literally, explicitly, and in great depth. What you're about to see is the completion of Revelation. This is the apocalypse, which is me revealing the truth about this world. This is the opening of the first seal, which leads to the events in Revelation. After this, you'll know why these things will happen, why the world will go to war against Israel, and why the current world order will be destroyed. I'll begin by showing you the true face of your enemies, as I have many examples of reversions and shapeshifting which prove what they are. After I'd seen a fair number of reversions, I began to recognize that they all matched the features of the newborn in the movie Alien Resurrection. So it became clear to me that this creature is a Drac. In fact, the first time I watched this movie, I had the feeling that it's a real creature. It had a lifelike quality to it that I couldn't attribute to a robot, and that would have been a robot from 20 years ago. Now I know that it's a Drac with makeup and prostheses. It's a living creature that's pretending to be a robot, and you can do that yourself. All you have to do is make jerky movements. It's much harder to make a robot that appears lifelike, not to mention the cost. I also noticed that there are only 2 credit groups listed for the newborn. The mechanical face, which is the mask it's wearing that contains the eyes, and the other credit is for the people who supposedly did some of the newborn's vocals. That's it. And given the budget of this movie, it simply wouldn't have been possible to build a life-sized, freestanding robot like this. Even if it were a robot, it doesn't matter, because it's still an accurate representation of the native form. It still shows you what they really are. A lifelike human robot will still show what a human looks like, so an alien race could recognize real humans after seeing a human robot. That said, the Drac playing the newborn does not show the fully reverted native form in this movie. It doesn't have a tail, spikes, or all of its teeth, and if it does have horns, they're covered. For example, there are only 2 shots in the movie that show fully reverted hands, while the rest only show partial reversions, and there are no shots of fully reverted feet. So you're seeing something that's close to the native form, but doesn't have all of the features. However, if you saw a fully reverted Drac, you'd still be able to recognize it based on the newborn. We start out with 2 examples of torso reversions from the back and side. Their torsos have elongated from human proportions, and the shoulder musculature is increased. For particularly the individual on the right. Their shoulders are clearly much too wide relative to the waist for a female body, close to twice the circumference. I believe that these bumps along the spine turn into spikes or blades when fully reverted to the native form. You can see that taking shape with the one on the right. Three more examples of ribcage expansion and spine bumps coming out. The ones on the right and left have also developed humpbacks, the spine curving forward so that the head is positioned in front of the torso. Their shoulder joints have also moved out to the sides, and they're reverting their pelvic bones as well. The newborn has a massive humpback with its head positioned far in front of its shoulders. This musculature in the back supports the leverage of the long neck and head as the spine curves from vertical to horizontal orientation. This is the physique of a bipedal predator. It stands upright, but the head needs to be forward from the torso so that it can attack with its mouth. This explains the humpback. The spine must curve forward to go from vertical orientation in the lower back to horizontal orientation in the neck. And this is the deepest torso reversion shown by the newborn in this movie. It's very close to its complete native form here. This individual is showing a very deep reversion of the hump and spinal curvature. At the peak of the hump, the spine is at least a foot out from its quote-unquote normal position. It looks more pronounced on her because she hasn't reverted the length of her body. If she did, it would look just like the newborn's. You can see the same kind of hump forming on this one, just not as deeply reverted. And her upper arm is elongated as well. This one is reverting the muscles in the center of the back that run between the scapulae and spine. These are clearly not human muscles. You can see something similar on the newborn. Lateral bands of muscle running from the top of the shoulder to the spine. It's possible that these are ridges in the epidermis, but they look like muscles to me. This one has increased the thickness of those muscles, so you can see that the boundary of that group runs from the scapula to about the midpoint of the spine. Again, you'll never see this on a human back. This one is reverting the muscles in his lower back, and that also matches the newborn. They both have the vertical muscles next to the spine, running up from the pelvis. And you can see the hump coming out above that as well. This is a Whippuglian species, and he's reverting the same muscles in his back, except that his extend all the way up. So he has a valley in the middle of his back from the pelvis to the shoulders. You can see the same muscles developing on this one. They come out from the lower back and separate above that, forming a valley around the spine. She's also reverting her rib cage. These two are reverting the humps on their upper backs with large spine bumps coming out, certainly too big to be human vertebrae. And again, notice the expanded shoulders on the one on the right. Here's a before and after showing torso reversion and decompression. Her ribcage is expanded to a much larger circumference in the right frame, and it's clearly taller as well. The back is also more rounded, as it's reverting into the hump, and the muscles in her shoulder have changed shape and become more pronounced. The newborn's abdomen slants forward, the ribcage slants backward, and the head comes forward, so his body has an S shape to it. That's what you're seeing with these two individuals, abdomen forward, ribcage backward. I've seen this in person as well, on a shirtless male imitation. This one has a very sharp point on its chest where the ribcage begins to slant back, and I'll show more examples of this chest bulge later. You can also see that it's reverting its upper back where the hump is forming. Now we're looking at the group of 3 muscles that run from the scapula to the back of the upper arm, behind the deltoid. The newborn and Bruce Lee have the same muscles there, and they're definitely not human muscles. The Dracs have extremely long arms, even in proportion to their bodies. So they need those extra muscles to assist the deltoid, to control the high force of leverage. You can see them on Natasha Henstridge here, extended further out. This one's extended even further out, and the bottom muscle is very well defined. It must be over 6 inches long, 15 centimeters, and again, that's definitely not human. Also notice that the deltoid is elongated and has a deep edge at the back, and that's exactly the same on the newborn. Now we're looking at the trapezius muscle and side of the upper back, around the scapula. They both have a deep edge along the back of the trapezius, with the depressed area below it. And the muscles on the side of the upper back are similar as well, which I'm pointing out here. Here's another similar-looking trapezius, and it's also reverting the spine bumps and a sharp point on the scapula. The trapezius again, and you can also see those lateral muscles or ridges between the scapula and spine, same as the newborn. The bottom of the rib cage is also bulged out, and we'll look at that again later in a frame where it shows in the newborn. Here you can see those muscles extended on the newborn, and it looks the same as the female imitations. They run straight from the scapula to the back of the humerus. The newborn has 2 bumps on the back of its shoulder, right above the deltoid. The female imitation has a bump in the same location, so that must be what she's reverting. It looks like it's part of some muscle. Raymond Cruz has put out a bump close to that area, so that may be the same thing. They're reverting the same kind of raised section along the upper edges of their scapulae, and this actually extends over the top of the deltoid. You don't see this on the newborn because it's covered by muscle, but it's definitely a skeletal reversion. Obviously, human scapulae don't have this.
Their scapulae extend further out than human scapulae, and their shoulders are positioned higher relative to the torso. In the black and white photo, you can also see that the scapula completely covers the back of the deltoid. That's how it looks on the newborn. The shoulder is extended out from the torso, and it's positioned higher than a human shoulder. The shoulders are flat on top, framed by the scapula in back and clavicle in front. The one on the right is also reverting her trapezius muscles, which are taller and more steeply slanted than human traps. She's also reverting her pelvis, and we'll look at that again later. The one on the left is reverting the back of her neck, where you can see that a depression is formed down the middle between those two muscles. You don't see this on the newborn because it's wearing a hood, but I have seen it in person a number of times, so I know it's a reversion. This is what the extended shoulder looks like from the front. A human arm makes contact with the rib cage when it's hanging straight down, but they've got sizable gaps in between. That's how it is on the newborn. There's a big gap between the arm and torso. Now we're looking at deltoid reversions. The deltoid is clearly much longer than a human deltoid, as it extends almost halfway down the upper arm. Not just the proportions, it also has a different shape than a human deltoid. It's more bulbous, bulged out at the top. That looks just like the newborn's deltoid, with the long bulbous heads. John Hurt is reverting his deltoid here, and a sharp gap is formed down the middle. That's the same gap that we see on the newborn, just that John's doesn't extend as far. Of course, you'd never see that on a human deltoid, since the center head is there. Sigourney has the gap here as well, and she's also reverting her arm. That too looks similar to the newborn's arm. The newborn's deltoid has more heads than a human deltoid, so each one is relatively narrow. The guy on the left is showing the same kind of deltoid, which has 4 or 5 separate heads. They also have a curvature to them, so that's another difference from a human deltoid. Bruce Lee has reverted narrow vertical ridges on his deltoids, and the newborn has those as well. So that's another match. This is Keira Knightley in Domino reverting her left shoulder and arm, and that looks very similar to the newborn. It certainly doesn't look like a woman's shoulder anymore. Due to the high shoulder joints, the newborn's clavicles have a steep slant, whereas human clavicles are more or less level. There's also a large gap below the clavicle where it meets the deltoid. That's what we're seeing with the individual on the left, and she's obviously reverting her ribs as well,
two more showing clavicle reversions, and you can see that they go over the top of the deltoid. They're clearly much longer than human clavicles, and the one on the left also has a steep slant and curvature to it. Again, this matches the newborn. It goes over the top of the deltoid and has the same steep slant and curvature. This is the deepest clavicle reversion I've seen in terms of shape. It slants up at about 45 degrees over the deltoid, and it stands very far out from the chest, so that it looks like it's almost separated. That looks exactly like the newborn's clavicle. She's also reverting her neck and trapezius muscle, which will come up in another comparison later. The one in the middle has the exact same shape as the newborn's clavicle, which curves at the midpoint. The one on the left is reverting the rest of her body as well, and it really doesn't look human anymore. It's Whip again, and this time he's reverting a muscle from his right upper pectoralis, which runs directly from the clavicle to the arm. It has the same triangular shape as the newborn's muscle, and the newborn actually has another muscle below that, which also extends out to the arm. You can see the lower muscle on Bruce here, and it's coming out from the sternum. The upper muscle is connected only to the clavicle. The muscles are very distinct on this one. Again, you can see that one is attached to the clavicle and the other is attached to the sternum. It also looks like there's a third muscle below that, which runs up to the same point on the arm. These photos show clear definition of the muscles running straight from the clavicle to the arm. This shows that the muscle is completely separate from the pectoralis and actually overlaps on top of it. So you could put your fingers under there and grip the muscle from both sides. This has the same function as the lateral scapular muscles on the back. It's there to assist the deltoid with the leverage of their extremely long arms. Looking at these two, it appears that the clavicle muscle continues down the front of the biceps and actually attaches to the forearm. If that's true, then it basically serves as an extra biceps muscle which is pulling from the clavicle instead of the arm. It looks the same on these two. The muscle comes out from the biceps as it attaches to the forearm, so the arm is wider there. They just started reverting, so the muscles are very thin, but they'll be much thicker when they're fully reverted. The muscle is clearly identifiable in the newborn here. It comes down from the clavicle, extends out between the torso and arm, pulls in close to the biceps, and then comes out again as it attaches to the forearm. similarities are even more evident with this one, the clavicle muscle and shape of the arm.